blue skies, and on every occasion that you do or don't smile.
So welcome to Sensible Secondhand Classics. I'm privileged today to be driving this lovely 1990 Rover 820 SI hatchback. This has been lent to the channel by Mr. Joshua Langstaff of Maverick Motors, and we're just driving around the lovely country road in Stratford-on-Avon today. So this is one of the earlier 800 series Rovers, and they were launched back in '86. You might have seen a certain base model 820 that appeared on a Welsh-based YouTube channel about 2 years ago. This is a little bit, shall we say, less dissolved than that one. This is also a nicer model. It's the 820 SI, so it's got the M series engine in it, with multi-point fuel injection developing 135 horsepower. The other engines available were that 820 base with the carburettor. There are very few of those left now, actually, because the car, the auto choke was quite poor. That developed about 104 horsepower. There was also a single point fuel injection version of this M series engine, which developed 120 horsepower. And then we get into the more interesting sort of engines in some ways. There were two V6s, a 2.5 and a 2.7. We won't refer to the later R17-800s in this video because they're really a little bit different from this. The 825, a 2.5 V6 Honda engine, that developed 173 horsepower, and then the 2.7 developed 177 horsepower. Right top of the range was the 820 Turbo. They're quite rare. They were sort of the later what's called the XX cars, and this is an XX, and that was 180 horsepower. One of the reasons why they didn't go too much further with it, I mean, the T series, which was a later development of the M series, they actually had those developing about 200 horsepower. One thing you do have to watch for in any 800 though is tyre wear, because they're front wheel drive, and the suspension is double wishbones all round. It's a Honda designed type, and yeah, they are, you know, a compact type of suspension unit, so the bonnet line and the scuttle panel on their cars are very low, but that does mean you get things like torque steer, which is interesting, shall we say. There's just one thing that I forgot to tell you about, and that's the VM Motori 2.5 Forbidden Fuel engine that you could get also in an 800, but as usual, due to controversial government legislation and many other factors, we don't talk about diesels on this channel. You know, it's been a long time since I've actually seen one of these up close and personal. It's wanted to show. When I was younger, one of our neighbours actually had one of these. I think it was an 827, and it was sort of gold company car. And sometimes we got to travel in it. It was an F registration, so similar type to this. This sort of hatchback or fastback version of the original XX 800 was launched in 1988. The saloon version came out a bit before in '86, which replaced the Rover SD1. If we take a look sort of inside, we'll see we've got slightly later instruments, because the original type looked a lot like the ones you found in a Maestro or Montego with Viera. This being an SI, you've got things like the seat height adjuster, the remote fuel and boot releases, which can be locked as well, and we've got a nice sort of Rover seatbelt cover as well. Mr. Langstaff also has this rather nice Rover key fob. Seats are very comfortable in this car. It does remind me of a larger R8, and of course, you know, they're both very closely based on Honda designs of the 1980s. Some of the instrument switchgear is quite strange. So these are buttons for the heating and ventilation. That's a rear heated window. This here is for the airflow recirculation, and this is a variable instrument dimmer switch, which is very delicate and I don't want to break it. Got a Philips stereo in this car. I've told it doesn't work particularly well, but this is the original stereo. You can see it closely matches the colour of the surround. If I very carefully just pick this up with one hand and then put the ignition key in, there's no key fob or anything on this, it's just a normal key. Think careful, yes, we get that to light up so you can see the clock actually works about the correct time as well. So lots of attention to detail. Open up the glove box to see if that's useful for secret mission documents. It probably would be. And oh, we've actually got some tapes in there too. Excellent. Let's tuck those in. There we go. 5-speed manual in this. I think this is a Honda PG1 gearbox in this. Handbrake's a bit weird. It's quite sort of soft, so you have to pull it up quite a long way to actually make it sort of be in the right position. We don't roll anywhere. Lots of courtesy lights. You've got one there. We've got one sort of at the back as well, and you've got one on this side. Sunroof as well. I'm not actually going to fiddle with electric sunroof today because I get a bit concerned about electric sunroofs in old cars. There is the bonnet release as well, just down here. Coin tray that I remember actually from the one that I used to travel in that our neighbours had when I was younger. Also here the wiper controls, sort of rear wiper, along with a fog light switch. Sort of soft feel steering wheel. It is a plastic one, I think. I think the Sterlings, which were sort of towards the upper part of the range, had the leather rimmed steering wheels. Electric mirror controls as well in this, along with lots of electric window controls as well. No air conditioning, I don't think, in this car. I think that was further up the range you got that. But yes, you know, for 1990, with power shot driver's window as well, which would be that one, it's pretty impressive. I think that's something to do with the door locking. I could be wrong, because there is a lockout switch on there, so I'm not entirely sure. Though there is an ashtray down here with 12-volt socket there, or cigarette lighter that used to be in the old days. One weird thing about this car, to just not get my cable hooked around the handbrake too much with my microphone, is that there is a blanking plate where there should be a courtesy light, and the Sterlings that were sold in America that were rebranded 800s, adopted the federal regulations, did actually have courtesy lights, but this car doesn't have one. And it has a light switch on top of the steering column. Yes, please. That's the kind of thing that we like on this channel. So open up the really, really long back door and get in. Because this is an SI, we've got rear electric windows, but we don't have electric rear seats that we would have in a Sterling. In the ashtray here, you can see as well, you get a rear cigarette lighter, it's like a Sterling. Lumbar support adjustment as well. One thing I do appreciate about Rovers of this era is that you can tuck the rear seat belts away in here. If you're sort of folding the seats down, that's quite handy. Headlining is sagging a little bit, but you know, what British car of this era does that not do it in? Very, very nice rear armrest. Squeaky as well, of course. Nice sort of plush velour fabric, and sort of wooden door caps. You can see The Rover's friends have just arrived. Map pocket, of course. We've actually got a proper map in there too. And these, all these famous sort of door locking switches, very, very Honda of the period. Yeah, it's rather nice in here. I do like it. You know, if I had a Sterling, I'd be enjoying myself and having a nice relaxing time too. But this is a Fastback, so it's a bit more of a driver's car. So I could use the remote lever, but I will just use the key because I've got the key in my hand. Enormous, enormous rear hatchback, absolutely huge. And a two-piece parcel shelf as well to put stuff in. Sorry, my fingers are going to land. That's just the way it goes in this channel. And amidst all this Langstaff stuff, they're going to the BMC and Leyland show tomorrow, which I'm sure you would have seen on the channel, because we do like the BMC Leyland show. Because this is the SI model, it also has a 16 valve badge there. The 16 valve multi-point fuel injection version of the M series. And yes, a rather handsome car, although there are one or two areas round the wheel arches and sort of down here. They're very common rough spots on these cars, and Mr. Langstaff's in the middle of sort of addressing this. But I'm pleased to say that up here, particularly this area that you'll be very familiar with if you're fans of a certain Welsh-based channel, is absolutely fine. So no problems there. Right, let's have a look at the engine as well. So here we have the M series engine, which develops 135 horsepower. It's related to the O series engine, which of course is related again to the B series engine, but you know, pretty different from the stuff that used to go into an MGB. Fuel injection, of course, and got lovely things like this program ignition control made in the UK, and this ignition core from Unipart, again with Austin Rover logos on it, just like this sort of air filter housing as well. Austin Rover is a sort of a name disappeared in 1988 when the company was sold to British Aerospace, and then after that it was just called a Rover Group. This car was actually owned by someone who I think worked for Rover at the time in 1990, a gentleman named Mr. Austin. And Mr. Austin had these lovely headlamp protectors in place, which is why the headlamps are going to be wonderful forever. But this car is actually in pretty good condition for one of these, and the paint's really good. I had an R8 from 1991 that you would have seen on the channel at the beginning of 2020, and this is the same colour and the same sort of era of car really, and the paint on it was nowhere near as good as this. The paint on this car is really good. Obviously we got spots of corrosion, but you know, you tell me a car of this era that doesn't rust. I don't think there are many of them around. One of the reasons why we're featuring this car on Sensible Secondhand Classics and not No Budget Reviews is because, well, I had a look around and you simply can't buy a nice 800 with an MOT for under £1,000 anymore. Decent 800s are sort of anywhere up from like £2,000 to £4,000 now, and you know, very, very nice turbos or V6s can be even more. So these aren't kind of the sort of things that are given away for free anymore, like, you know, a certain one from a Welsh-based YouTube channel was. They are actually proper bona fide classics, and just driving this now, particularly on this really smooth road that we've come along, is an absolute pleasure. I just feel this is a bit like driving the old R8s I've had. It's a very similar type of interior to them, and the suspension system on the Honda Concerto, which an R8 was based, is actually virtually identical to this. It's a sort of scaled down version, double wishbones all round, and steering feels quite responsive. I know these were criticised in the day for not being the sort of most sporty cars, like, you know, like, I don't know, a 5 Series would have been, but to me this feels great. The steering feels weighted quite well. I know these suffer from torque stick, particularly with the turbos. And the ride is really good. It's very compliant. It's not crashy or anything. And of course, there's that famous footage of Tony Pond driving around the Isle of Man in a V6 version, one of these, at some crazy speed, breaking the record in the process when he was doing it. So it does feel quite confident on the road, and more so than I was expecting. So I do like it, viewers. I do like it very much. I mean, I don't know why I'm surprised about that. It's one of the few Rovers from the sort of post 1985 period I actually haven't driven. I've driven most of the others, and this feels really nice. Manual ones of these 820s are quite rare now. There was an automatic available, of course. If you wanted something really rare, I mean, I suppose you could go for the Honda Legend that this is based on. I mean, those are very rare, and bizarrely, some of those were even made in this country. One of the only sort of foreign executive cars, I think, actually that were. So yes, it's been an absolute pleasure to drive this, and the only problem is I've now got to give the keys back, which I'm not looking forward to that particularly, but I'm sure Mr. Langstaff is. So viewers, we're just going to take a look at some of the trim levels that were on the XX Rover 800. The base model that you would have seen on the Hub Nut channel, E, I, SE, SI, SLI, just a turbo, Sterling, the Vitesse, and then the SI-SE, which is very confusing, and the SLI-SE, which were special edition models, sort of run-out models in 1991, when the engine in this car was increased to 140 horsepower. So these cars used to be no budget reviews all day long, well under £1,000, very unloved. According to Mr. Langstaff, and I'm sure that he knows far more about these things than I do, there are only 140 of these Mark I or XX 800s left, and so they command actually reasonable prices. Even EVR17s, the later facelifted ones, you really can't seem to find one of those these days for under £1,000 in decent condition with an MOT. So are these classics? Yes. Are they sensible second-hand classics? Well, they're not the most reliable cars. There are a few things to be aware of on these, and one of them is the filler necks that rot out, and various problems with the engines. But overall, if you do drive one of these around, and you're driving one of these around today, obviously this is the West Midlands, and so these cars were made not too far from here, then people do look at you, and I think they have a lot of respect and fondness for them, and I can understand that. I mean, even I do. So yes, definitely worth considering. Thank you ever so much indeed for watching this episode of Sensible Secondhand Classics. Thank you again to Mr. Langstaff for Maverick Motors channel. Don't forget to subscribe to him as well. And I will see you soon for yet another episode when we look at something equally tasty.